Welcome to Gold Derby's production design panel with Emmy nominees. I'm David Buchanan, here today with Glenda Rovello from Frasier. Glenda, much of your career has been spent doing multicam comedy and multicam sitcoms. What do you love most about that genre?
It's very quick. It's very fast paced. And I came from an architectural office where I would spend months on like a quarter of an inch of details. So my first show, I think it was a young comedians for HBO. And it was like start to finish, the drawings were like in 3 days. And while I had the drawing skill, I never had that kind of freedom, just like you just put it out there, and it was pretty exciting. It was fantastic in that respect.
This is the much awaited return of Frasier Crane. I know so many fans of that original series have always been wanting to see the show come back and see Kelsey re-inhabit that character. Were you a fan of the original show when it was on? And did you go back and revisit those episodes when you were starting to put ideas together for what a Frasier in 2023, 2024 would look like?
Um, I would say that, I did see the original Frasier, but not consistently. I think, like either I didn't really have a television at my disposal because there are so many kids in my family, or I was in college where I didn't have a television. But I admired the set design and that the production designer, Roy Christopher. I just thought he was so immensely talented, and that he really changed the format of the sitcom plan, but also he so elevated the design portion. And you could really see how influential the actual design period was to him. That postmodernism, that man had, he had it down, whether it was the fireplace or the idea of that oversized sofa, and it was like the Coco Chanel sofa from her apartment. It was just fantastic. And that coffee table, I don't know if you remember it, it had those huge balls, holding, that held up the wood slab. It was such a fantastic period piece.
And you had some great experts from that original series on this. Of course, Kelsey is intimately familiar with that original set and that character. And you had James Burrows directing again a few
Right.
of the episodes. How much input did they have when you were doing those very first initial, sketches or ideas or conceptualizing of what a new Frasier apartment would look like? And we'll dive into detail of what you've come up with for the new apartment. But how much input did they have? How much did they want to kind of give you ideas, and how much did they want to let you do your own thing?
I've worked with Jimmy Burrows, for, probably 250 episodes of television, if not more. So, and in those episodes, like, I started Will and Grace and then so many pilots with Jimmy. So I kind of understand what he looks for in a physical set. And conceptually, there were many voices that I discussed the concepts with. And Frasier was moving to a new city, and there were a few like needles to thread. It had to be a building that his firefighter son could inhabit. And then Frasier buys the building. So I had to, and it had to be close to Harvard. So I just kind of looked at the building stock, the architectural stock in Boston and close to Cambridge. And I found some buildings that I thought were interesting. And then I also wanted to find a building on the back lot of Paramount so that if we ever went outside, I could have a pretty close match. So, those were like, that kind of defined what the era was of the apartment. And then the interiors were totally up to supporting the character in that, like we knew that that Frasier, he is he cares a lot about things and design and objects. So we tried to have some overlap with the original, his original Seattle apartment, while the architecture changed radically, the design, choices, I thought were kind of consistent. This is a person who really cares about design. So we, had some of the pre-Columbian pieces, some artifacts from his travels, through, the interim 25 years, 30 years. And then the current design choices, I went with Porter Taleo, which is the people who did the Rorschach looking ink spots. So, and those were created for us. And then the furniture, because in the original show, they always wanted to see and say, so we have to have the real things. And so, like, I really can't do a Coco Chanel sofa because it would have to be the real one. So we tried to select pieces in a very short time frame that we could elevate. And like, we did use some Kelly Wearstler fabric, and we did have a ceramicist. This is like one of the Easter eggs in the set. They're the pendants that are right in front of the staircase, and there's two, and they were created for us. And they're Morse code. One says Frasier, and the other one says Kelsey. So that's one of our Easter eggs. And then everything else, like their original pieces, like the brutalist wall pieces or ceramic pieces, those are the real deal. And the writers wanted to say Christian Lacroix, and so we had to get their permission and their pillows. So that happened over and over. Mario Bellini, they wanted to say things, so we had to get the real pieces.
Yeah, the episode that you're nominated for is Moving In, which is a really terrific installment where Frasier is now decorated the apartment and Freddie's moving in with him, and they're clashing over their, sensibilities and what Freddie wants to display and what Frasier, has established as his aesthetic. When you read that script as a production designer, how exciting is it to see that design choices that you're making are front and center in the plot line rather than just as a backdrop for the action?
It's very gratifying. It's great. So, we're very conscious of our choices and the fact that it may give the writers some additional inspiration. And for Frasier, we actually had a list of the objects that they could refer to and who the author was. So they have their little Bible of designers that they can refer to.
One of my favorite episodes of the season is the finale, the Christmas episode. How fun was it to kind of retrofit that apartment that you spent the season curating with holiday decorations? And of course, there's that, mistake with all of those Christmas trees coming in. It's just an absolutely beautiful set to look at. How fun was that episode for you to do?
Well, it's a whole lot of fun. Even the trees, we had such I don't know if you noticed, but it went from like kind of a traditional tree with lots and lots of lights and colorful, and we went in like two scenes to just white lights, and it became very dreamy. So that was all planned, and we have a really fabulous florist that she does our sets week to week. So yeah, nothing's taken for granted.
Aside from the episode that you're nominated for, are there other sets or episodes from this first season that you're particularly proud of or that stand out in your memory as accomplishments from this season?
Gosh, yes, I think that the bowling alley, that's kind of like a fun exercise in just blasts of color and shapes. So that was very fun. And Freddie's bedroom, I think, is really, I think it's a beautiful small space. And I love how that it's the colors are so deep. It really provides a really intimate envelope for our actors. Uh, Gosh, we just finished our second season, so those are the sets that are, most current, and we just finished like a few days ago. What else happened the first season? Gosh, I wish I had a better memory, but apparently I don't.
Well, you can always go back and revisit the episodes. They're all terrific. Glenda Rovello, congratulations on the Emmy nomination and the first season of Frasier. Thank you for talking to Gold Derby today.
Thank you.
Welcome to Gold Derby's production design panel with Emmy-nominated production designers. I'm David Buchanan, here with Bob Shaw of the Gilded Age Season 2. Bob, the second season predominantly is about these warring opera houses in the late 1880s New York City, between the Met and the Academy of Music. And I know that you're an opera buff. So this is something you're very interested in. So when you read those scripts and heard what the arc of the second season would be, what were you most excited to dive into as a production designer?
Well, I knew in advance that it was going to happen because way back when I interviewed for the show in 2018, I asked, are you going to be getting into the opera wars eventually? And I think having brought that up might have been something that sort of sealed the deal on getting the job. And then early on, there was a reason we had the Academy of Music in season 1, which was the precursor to the Met. And we went to look at the Opera House in Philadelphia. And after we scouted it, I said, now a warning, because if you're going to get into the new Met, that is the only European style opera house in the country. So I kind of knew that it was going to go that way, but I couldn't wait to get there. But and I had an idea that it would be the Philadelphia Academy of Music, but of course the whole story is about getting a box at the opera. And then looking in a little further, we realized that the Philadelphia Academy of Music only had 2 boxes. So we had to create a whole horseshoe on stage, and with 5 boxes, and you could sort of slide it in order to see across the horseshoe. And I said it had to be sort of inserted between the balcony levels at the Philadelphia Academy of Music as if it were a giant cassette. And so that was something I was really looking forward to doing. But reading the script, the thing I dreaded that I knew was going to be there at some point was the opera house under construction, because it was enough of a problem to have to create the opera house and the opera boxes. But the opera house under construction was, a particular challenge, and it ended up being, 3 different locations being pushed together in order to make one opera house: the Philadelphia Academy of Music, the opera house set that we built, and a movie theater in Albany, that we had to sort of make it look like it was under construction. And anyway.
Was it a similar process for the Academy of Music on the series?
The Academy of Music is another kind of funny story, because we knew very early on that we were going to be working a lot in Troy, New York, because they had this tremendous stock of houses from the 1800s. And I was scouting with our amazing location manager, Lori Pickus, and we had stopped in the corner. We got a coffee. We were leaning against a wall, and we saw this big illustration on the wall of a music hall. And for some reason, when the scouts had come and pre-scouted and given us this menu of things to look for, they had neglected to find that there was a music hall in the town already from the 1870s. So it was like this kind of ridiculous movie moment of looking up and going, wait a minute, is there a music hall in this city? And so it was fantastic to be able to work there. It's known for having like the best acoustics in the country, and you look on the walls and there are plaques commemorating every musical giant of the 1800s and the early 1900s, all appeared here in Troy. I'm in Troy now.
Yeah, I think that history really leaps off the screen. The episode you've submitted and are nominated for is Close Enough to Touch. And a lot of that episode is set in Newport, in Bertha's new Newport mansion. She's hosting a really lavish dinner for the Duke. I just love the interiors of that mansion, and I wanted to know, what location did you use for that? And how did you want that to kind of speak to what we know of Bertha's style from New York that we kind of had established in season 1?
It's interesting that we look at the cottages, the beautiful palaces in Newport, and a lot of them are more impressive than actually attractive. Some of them are so over the top. The Breakers has detail on detail on detail, and relatively speaking, the Elms, which is the place we used for the Newport mansion, is restrained by Newport standards, not by anybody else's. And, Julian Fellows actually said, I think this is the one I could live in. And so, and also we were just kind of running out of mansions. And, but it got to be very confusing because previously we had used part of the Newport mansions to represent parts of our New York sets. And so it just so happened that the Elms was their Newport mansion, but the bedroom on the second floor was Gladys's New York bedroom. And, it created a lot of confusion because we were shooting in that set, which was called Maple House, but then we were also shooting in Marble House, which is one of the Newport mansions. And the dining room of Marble House was actually, Maple House was actually portrayed by the dining room of Marble House. And so I always say it was like, the scene from the Danny Kaye movie, the court jester with the pellet with the poison and all that. But very confusing. Bits and pieces of 3 or 4 houses were used, for every mansion in Newport.
Your nominated episode is also major because it features Aunt Ada's wedding, which is a beautiful scene. And I wanted to ask what you were looking for in finding that church, especially because the kind of dramatic climax of that episode is Christine Baranski's character walking down the long kind of along the pews to take her seat late after the wedding has begun. So what did you want to look for in that location to shoot that scene?
Well, one of the great pleasures of the show is getting to explore and discover our architectural heritage. And we actually started the season having to find 3 churches because it was all about Easter. And Easter was a huge thing, and everybody sort of paraded down Fifth Avenue and wore their finest. And we had to have the church that was for the servant class, the church that was for the Black elite class, and this church that was for the sort of upper crust. And we found it all, right in the Troy and Albany area. And this church that we found, which was an Episcopalian church, which was the religion of most of New York's upper crust, was just incredible. I mean, the marble mosaics on the floor. I mean, you just wish there were a reason, which of course there isn't, to feature more of it. But then, as often happens, the interior of the church we used was fabulous, but the exterior was on a very busy street and virtually unfilmable by us. So we had to use another church for the exterior. So everything's always broken down into pieces that, and you hope that people don't realize that they've been in 3 places when they think they've been in 1.
There's also a small scene in this episode, and then it returns in a later episode of George Russell's rail car, which I think is so ornately decorated. It's such a fun new kind of traveling location for us. What kind of research did you do to get that set right? Because it's in some sense fleeting, but it really leaves an impression on the audience.
It's one of my favorite sets, even though it's the smallest, because by being that small, we could just pour more and more detail into it. And the little brackets, the little modillions they're called, I think there's something like 70 of them just in this one train car. And Michael Engler, our director, said, I think it's doing the quilted headliner, the curved, upholstered part of the train was all, silk fabric. And, finding the details. And we used carpet that was made by somebody who does, historic restorations. The old carpets were almost like horse blankets, and they're made in like 2-foot sections, and they have to be sewn together, and they're almost like a mat. But it was great to be able to, pour more and more detail into a little space. It really was one of my favorites.
There are so many memorable episodes in this second season. Aside from Close Enough to Touch, are there favorite episodes of yours? Are there favorite locations or sets that you constructed and designed yourself that really come to mind when you look back on season 2?
It's really the Opera House. As an opera fan, I became a designer because I was equally interested in music and art when I was a teenager. And I thought somehow I cooked up this idea that if I designed scenery for operas, that it would combine my interests. So I was, a junior in high school and trying to design my production of Wagner's Ring Cycle in the back of the art department when I was like 17 years old. And, I worked in theater for quite a while before I got into film and television, and really only ever did 1 opera at an opera company. So it was especially satisfying if I couldn't design the opera, I can design the opera house. So that was my favorite. And it's those things when all the elements come together, and working with visual effects and hatching a plan for something that you haven't done before and hoping that it works. That was really my favorite thing.
Bob Shaw, congratulations on your Emmy nomination and season 2 of The Gilded Age. Thank you for talking to Gold Derby today.
Thank you.
Welcome to Gold Derby's production design panel with Emmy nominees. I'm David Buchanan, joined by Eric Morrell from Last Week Tonight with John Oliver. Eric, I wanted to start by asking you, your career has really been focused on variety series, reality series, some competition series. What do you love most about working in those genres, which seem so disparate, but what's your favorite aspect of working in that type of style and format of show?
That's a good question. The reality stuff was fun because it was very showy and very presentational, but I really got more into the comedy stuff because I wanted to just make people laugh and just like do something really silly. I did a bunch of like serious features before that, and like I just wanted it to be simple and be like, just silly and goofy. Yeah.
Are there things that you brought from, your reality experience to Last Week Tonight? What earlier in your career has really influenced all the work that you've done with John Oliver?
Yeah. With the reality stuff, it was a lot about like showiness and like I'm trying to think of, I haven't thought about it in a while, but with John Oliver, I did comedy stuff early on. Like I did some stuff for The Onion, and I did, I did those serious films, and I think that that's really what I was able to bring to John Oliver, is because a lot of times the joke is not in the thing that we make. It's in, the presentation of it, or it's in like, the idea behind it. So me actually playing it straight and trying to like make it as real as possible is really the trick.
I believe this is your 6th nomination for Last Week Tonight, which is just wonderful and such an achievement. I wanted to ask you, what about this season and the nomination for your work this time is really unique to you versus, all the other recognition that you've received?
Sure. Yeah, what's weird about this show is that each time I like put up a different episode, it's for something completely different. So this particular one was for like this model train short that we made that was like a Thomas the Train sort of thing. And it was great because like I usually draw pictures and send them off to a shop and they make everything. But for this one, I actually made a lot of the stuff for the short. So in some ways, like I feel like this one was more personal because I got to like touch everything. But yeah, that answers your question.
Yeah, let's dive into it.
Sure.
Like you said, the episode you're nominated for is Freight Trains, and it has this really incredible 4 or 5 minute short where you take so much of the lessons that we've been taught through John's monologue into this really fun and also, kind of devious short. I just wanted to start by asking you, it seems like such a gargantuan amount of work to bring all of that to life. How much time did you have to do that? And did you have more time? Like, do you get more time and more notice for something this involved versus maybe some of the other work that you do on other episodes?
Yeah, sometimes we have a little bit more time. This one in particular, we knew that it was coming up, but we didn't know when and like when they're going to write the script. That really defines how long we have. But none of us wanted to do it exactly because I just didn't think we had the ability to do it. And I thought it'd be too expensive to ship out to like an animation company or something like that. And so I kept pitching that it should just be, we should use clips from the show and like change the narration. But it turned out based on our story, that was just impossible. We would have to make the whole thing. And so we kind of all realized that. And I had said we could do it over and over. And it was the week before Thanksgiving. And we said that we were going to do it. And so I started calling people, but everybody was leaving for Thanksgiving. So we only had a week and a half to do it. And so I just spent that whole week just modeling things in 3D. And then we printed them all out the next week. So we made I actually have a bunch of the stuff here, but we made all the people and everything like that. And then I would just print them as I got back to the office.
That's amazing. I have to ask, how much did you, prior to this and the research, know about Thomas the Train? I know this is based on, the British version, which had a more darker, cynical, tone and sense of humor, which just fits so appropriately to the story. So how much did you know? And then how much research did you do to say, okay, let's take the details that we're incorporating from our kind of version, but make them, aesthetically similar to the original?
Yeah. I had seen the show. I mean, I'd seen they showed episodes of Thomas the Tank Engine in the 90s under a different title or whatever. But so I'd seen bits and pieces. My dad actually, when I was growing up, always built the train during Christmas. He built HO scale, which is a much smaller scale. And so I knew that trains were finicky, and I know that they break all the time. He spent most of the time fixing his trains more than playing with them. So I knew that that was the case. I watched as much as possible. We really based it only on the first 5 seasons, and I think each episode's only 10 minutes, so you can really get through it in maybe a day. And then it was really about finding out how they pulled it off, because their trains are not that big. I can show you, our train is this big, and here's the front of it, and their train was maybe about an inch taller. So the issue that they had was, when they put things next to the train, they were too small, and so they'd have to basically shoot another scale, a larger scale, when you didn't see the trains. We were able to do that. We had to do that too. So I would print out a smaller version and a bigger version, but we were able to put in the bigger version into our smaller version, essentially. Basically in post, we shot both and then pasted them together.
There's some, yeah, no, I was going to say there's some amazing kind of pyrotechnics in this short. The Children's Hospital, unfortunately, on fire because the train blocking,
Yes.
the fire engines. And then, of course, when it turns into a bomb train and that poor village goes up. I mean, how many takes does that take? How many models do you make to, test it out and see how it's going to look and how it's going to work? How complicated are those scenes when you have to actually destroy what you've just created?
Yeah, I mean, we could only burn the hospital once. We could only afford to build that once. A lot of this was just time, because the guy who built the hospital, also built a bunch of the other buildings. But in terms of the trains, we crashed the train the last shot. We knew it was going to break. We had 2 trains made, but I was expecting one to break during shooting, and it did. So yeah, I had 1 million cars. I bought as many cars as I could, and then we just crashed the cars over and over. But the train physically only crashes maybe once, maybe twice. I can't remember, but we knew it was the end. Yeah.
You mentioned earlier too that this series allows you to have so much variety in what you do week to week. I can't imagine, when you hear the ideas and get the scripts, it's just a million different directions. Are there other episodes this season, other than the one that is nominated, that you're particularly proud of? Things that stand out as, really remarkable on the work that you and your team did?
Yeah, right before this one, we did a couple of projects, but one of them, we knew we were going to do this thing about the New Zealand bird competition, where everybody can vote for a bird that they like, and that's the whole thing. And we knew that we were going to advertise across the world about it, but we didn't know how we were going to do it in the stage. And so we were coming off the strikes, and I was just feeling like we needed to do, or I wanted to do something that I'd never done before. So I drew I don't know, maybe 10 ideas that were just things I had no idea how to pull off. And I thought they would just kind of throw it out. But they picked this one where it was a 70-foot wide bird puppet. And so I was very surprised when they decided to do it. And so, yeah, we made that maybe a month before the train thing. So it was a very strange thing to go from such a large scale object to tiny, tiny things. But these were all characters, which is kind of a funny thing because I never get to do characters. I always have to do, or not have to do, but I always do the, the backgrounds and things like that. But
Eric,
weird
congratulations.
one.
Congratulations on the Emmy nomination, and congratulations on this season of Last Week Tonight.
Thanks so much.
Welcome to Gold Derby's production design panel with Emmy nominees. I'm David Buchanan, joined by Patrick Howe from Only Murders in the Building. Patrick, this third season of Only Murders obviously centers around this big theatrical event that Martin Short's character is throwing, Death Rattle Dazzle, new musical. How excited were you to take the aesthetic that you had established in the first two seasons and take it out of the apartment building and put it into a totally different space?
I was really delighted to be able to do that. It was exciting to get out of the building a little bit, excuse me, and I was so look forward to sort of getting back to my original roots of my theater background in terms of design, and it was so fun to integrate really my whole career of television designing and my initial studies of theater design, and to be able to use them hand in hand. I love that so much.
I wanted to ask you exactly that, which is, how much of a theater buff are you, and what shows and ideas or designers came to mind when you heard the concept of what this musical would be, and, the constraints of the time and space that you had to pull it off?
Yeah, it was such an exciting process to go through, because what was unique about it was that normally, production designer or a designer for a live theater, particularly a musical, you would have a book and a score. All of the other creative contents would exist already. So you'd have your music lyrics and book to be inspired by, and to get one and to draw from, and to get one's design ideas. But this was kind of the opposite, where all there was really a treatment by our showrunner that came down to just being a verbal, some good comprehensive meetings between John Hoffman and myself, but it was really just telephone conversations of John describing what if there was a script, this is what it would be like, because it was never going to be written. There was never the actual script written, not even a whole plot of a whole piece. We just knew that the audience was only ever going to see little snippets of it. So that's an awkward thing to get inspiration to design from, because again, I don't have a tone or a quality of any of the songs or anything to listen to be inspired by. But fortunately, John's descriptions were quite good, and he was able to just really describe the basics of like where the show should take place, which was taking place on at a Nova Scotia lighthouse. And John would just say things like, the lighthouse, we should see the exterior of it. There should be some rocks, because we'll find a dead body on the rocks. And you see there's a set of triplets that live inside the lighthouse, and the triplets are going to be accused of murdering the person that's on the, so like you would just describe plot points. And so I just would piece together bits of the puzzle of what the set requirements would be. And I did a lot of research of what Nova Scotia lighthouses looked like at the turn of the century. And fortunately, there was a lot of commonality between them. And so I picked the best elements from them to work from. And inspirations came from a lot of different people. We also had some different other sets in the show besides that musical that were theater pieces, which was really nice. Because we did a Richard Rodgers 1962 introducing Diane Carroll, because the character Loretta, that was a show that she saw as a kid, and so was able to represent however we wanted a a sort of made up version of No Strings that theoretically took place in Paris. And that was wonderful to do. And then there was another cause to give an introduction to the history of our fictitious theater, the Gooseberry, which was this like seeing a little scene of Ashes to Ashes, which was as if it was done when for the debut of the theater or near its inception in the 19 teens or maybe 20 or so. So it was a very sort of primitive style, it was theater at the time, and I took inspirations from Robert Edmund Jones and this classic designer, several other people as well, to sort of just collage a lot of interesting bits together.
And how early did you decide to use the United Palace? I think that's where you shot. So how early did you know that that's where you were going to do it, and how influential was that decision on the scale of the sets that you were going to make for Death Rattle Dazzle?
Yeah, that's a great question, and we did use the United Palace, and we were locked into presenting it as the United Palace, even from season 2, the last episode where we see Ben Glenroy on stage for a play, which turns out to have been a version of this play. When we see him collapse on stage at the end of season 2, that was done at the United Palace. So we had kind of already established that theater house where the audience is. We spent a lot of time researching the possibility of using other theater stages to maybe not have to go back there, even though it's a really beautiful facility. So I was glad that we were able to go there, because now the only thing that we did use there was the audience and the physical stage, which when it comes down to it, it's essentially a black box with a main, with a grand curtain. Not to oversimplify it, but those were the two things that we were dependent on in the location. We used a little bit of the lobby once or twice, but everything else that relates to the theater was something that we built on stage. So all of the dressing rooms and all of the hallways and all of the corridors of the dressing rooms and the garret ups, the little private room at the top of the theater that we see in episode 6 and 10. Those are all things built on sound stages.
Speaking of episode 10, that's the episode that you're nominated for opening night, and that's where we see all of these theatrical sets for the musical that you've built. I do want to ask you about other episodes in the season. I, in particular, love what you did with Loretta's apartment. I think that tells us so much about the character. She's a new character played by Meryl Streep for the season. And we learned so much about, seeing her in her built environment, her apartment. Are there other sets that you did for this season that you're particularly proud of and that were memorable versus the work you got to do on seasons 1 and 2? Right.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned Loretta's. I love that set as well, and it turned out so great. I just got so much positive feedback for something, which is interesting because it is in real life, and it was an extremely small set, and it was kind of interesting to have to be able to pour so much information into a small room. It was scripted in story, it wanted to be a 400 square foot studio apartment or less. And normally in TV, you can cheat things to the production's convenience and usually make sets larger. Anything that's written, you could make it larger so that it's easier to film in and faster to film in, and you just more space for cameras and things. But this I really wanted to I kept it to less than the 400 square feet. And there were a lot of requirements in it, but I was able to just pack in a lot of information. And it's true that people felt like the minute they saw it, that they knew what Loretta was like, that played by Morrell. And I was thrilled about that. And just we developed some backstory for Meryl's character Loretta, and just try to insert as much decor and I tried to develop the architecture that would make sense for a small apartment, because the mandate was that Loretta had lived there for 40 years, and and she was of modest means, and she was always studying to be a wannabe actress and never having quite made it. And I was very concerned of doing a character of that age that had been in an apartment for 40 years. The last thing I wanted it to do was seem like a claustrophobic or granny-like apartment, and because that's just not what this character was like. So I wanted to portray how her creativity and a sense of comfort, and how home was important to her. Uh, um, and so we just sort of worked that into all of the details of the collage of wallpapers and stuff like that. I really loved Mabel's apartment. That was really kind of one of my favorites to redo, because in story for 2 seasons, the audience had seen it being a completely unrenovated apartment, and now was the opportunity to have a brand new, fresh look, and that was scripted to be have the style of a staged apartment. So it was it was shockingly different and nice, and a fresh look compared to the down and out and constantly under construction, but never really changing apartment for 2 seasons. And then the audience got to see it right away, and of course learn that it was up for sale, which is why it had that sort of very neutral and kind of New York City style staged look of a contemporary space. Loved doing that. I loved representing the penthouse apartment. That's become a joke on the show now, that every year they'll write somebody else staying in the penthouse apartment, and therefore it just gets decorated and styled to that, usually somewhat to that actor, and certainly to the character they're playing. So in that case, it was an interior for Paul Rudd playing a really narcissistic movie star, and that was a lot of fun, because the directive there was about the script was like, open on a Planet Hollywood's worth of memorabilia to the celebrity Ben Glenroy, the actor. So that's all they needed to say, and we knew that we could not, the more would be more, and we could not go too far. So had a lot of fun working as much. He was a superhero Cobra, so he was the snake character. When he by night, when he was helping the police solve crime in sort of the spirit of a Marvel movie or something. And so that was really, really hilarious to work on, and hence why I developed the big Cobra sculpture for the foyer of the apartment, so that, because the only way to enter this apartment is through the penthouse elevator, and you open onto this little foyer area. And so I just wanted it to be that any character that entered, the first thing they saw was this, giant overscale gilded Cobra snake. And, that would really set the tone for the attitude for the whole apartment.
Patrick, yeah. Patrick, congratulations on the season and all that great work, and congratulations on the Emmy nomination.
Oh, thanks so much.
Welcome to Gold Derby's production design panel with Emmy nominees. I'm David Buchanan, joined by Gianna Costa from RuPaul's Drag Race. Gianna, I wanted to start by asking you, you've been with this show for a very long time. So just wanted to ask, how have you seen the show evolve over the seasons that you've been with the show? And in particular, how has the production design and your approach to the work changed over those years?
Well, being on the show for 12 seasons, you see a lot change from the beginning, where the budgets were pretty much not as existent as it is today. So when you are able to expand the budget every year, you can add more to the sets. And, we have a talented crew. So the crew every year, it's like trying to push, our limits of what can we do to, make the show bigger and better, elevate it every year.
I believe this is your 4th nomination for the series.
Yes.
What about this nomination in particular and this past season of work are you most proud of, and how is it unique from the recognition you've received in the past?
Well, I mean, every year that being the 4th one, it's such an honor, because you know, you work so hard, and when you're in it, when you're in the trenches, you don't like see what the outcome is. You're happy when you're doing it, when you're ecstatic when it's done, but when you get the recognition and the nomination, it is always, you know, such a privilege and a surprise. And, you know, this year, you know, we worked really hard, and, you know, I feel like every year is unique, and it's hard to judge off of like past work, but because when you're in it, it's you're focused really on what you're getting done for that season. So I mean, every year it's different.
There's so much variety in what you get to do too, between the challenges and your role in bringing them to life. How much does Rue kind of contribute to the vision of the production design when you have a task, you know, and contribute to what it should look like?
I mean, Brew has a hand in everything, every aspect of the show. So, you know, when you're presenting something, you have to make sure that, you know, the final eyes, you know, approve it. So the whole show, he has a hand in everything.
You're nominated for 2 episodes, so let's start with RDR Live, which is just a great installment, which is kind of a challenge, spoofing and putting on skits, a la an SNL.
Mhm.
I just love that challenge. I love what you did with it. I mean, how excited were you when you heard that concept, and to bring these different sketches to life? And how much time did you have to bring? I think there were maybe 4 or 5 different different sets for the sketches. How much time did you have to realize all of those?
Well, I mean, the challenge with an episode like that is that you're also working with queens who are not used to working in that environment. So, you know, trying to give them enough space in each set to let them shine, but also we have to keep in mind that we're only shooting this in a day, and it's also the day we shoot it is when we shoot the elimination. So we have very limited amount of time in that one day. So what we had was shells of sets, so like base sets, and in between each scene that was being shot while the queens were performing, we were flipping over the set next to it as quietly as we could. So it was like maybe 15 minutes tops or so, and trying to like think of ways to multi-purpose things or how to set things ahead of time. So that the challenge, you know, it's a fun challenge in a way for us to see what we can get done in a short amount of time, but also what design wise can we bring in that amount of time that doesn't look like we're just throwing something together.
Did you
I mean,
have
SNL is amazing. So I mean, you know, let's try to. I mean that they have it down.
Yeah, I was just gonna ask you, are you a fan of SNL?
Oh yeah,
And how
definitely.
fun was it to kind of put your stamp on, you know, this version of Weekend Update, for example, you know,
Oh, yeah.
the new
Mm,
like how fun was that
yeah.
for you to do that?
It's always fun to just like, you know, how like they take things from the real world and put like the comedic spin. It was like our drag take on that. So it was fun to do it that way. You know, if you're thinking about like us doing our drag version of some of the SNL bits.
I know you had to do this very quickly, but when you heard what the different sketches were going to be, was there one that you were most looking forward to preparing for?
I mean, the Christmas one, of course, because it's always fun to do a Christmas set. And it was the last set we shot because it was the one that had the most things in it. So also the one that was the noisiest. So you have to, you know, try to put in all the packages and everything as quietly as possible. But that one, of course, was the most fun and colorful one that we could do. And then, you know, the queens themselves, they add their part of the set as well with their outfits. So they all looked so beautiful on the backdrop.
That's exactly what I wanted to ask you next, which is it sounds like you had no time while they were performing to watch. So when you got to see the cut or the finished episode, which of those were you most pleased with how your work came out, and then, you know, how the queens looked on your sets?
I mean, definitely the Barbara Shop quartet because it was funny, and I mean, they really the queens looked like gorgeous. So just all visually all together, it was like the complete, you know, package.
The second nominated episode is Work
Mhm.
the World, which
Mhm.
has, I think, in some ways more subtle work from you. So, for example, there's that segment of the episode where they're recording their verses for this power anthem.
Mhm.
Where did you shoot that? Was that on the main stage? And then what kind of subtle tweaks do you have to do to make that, make it feel like we're in a different environment?
That was on the stage that we do all of our challenges on. And the other designer, Jen, she had a main role in that. But a lot of it, Gus, our lighting director, gets to have fun on those episodes when we give them we can kind of give a shell for the queens to dance on these types of episodes, and lighting gets to really highlight the set and the queens.
Yeah, I think the lighting really stands out in the kind of finished product of Power. What did you have to do to transform that space into that beautiful, in some senses, a black box space that you bring to life with light and with the costumes and with the band?
Yeah, when we do sets like that, it's definitely the flooring, the Marlite flooring, the black flooring is really what makes Gus's lighting design pop and really, sets the stage. So it's something so simple as the shiny black flooring really can, with the lighting, it's amazing what it can do.
And before I let you go, I just want to ask you too, is there any challenge or episode from the rest of the season that you're particularly proud of and that stands out when you look back, other than these two?
Well, I really have fun in the first 2 episodes because we do the photo shoot challenges when we're introduced to the queens for the first time. So it's really fun to do these little photo shoots. And I particularly like the doorbell cam one we did because I kind of wanted to make it like a cartoon neighborhood in a way. Slightly realistic, a little bit of a Barbie house, but I had fun with that one a lot too.
Gianna, congratulations on the season of RuPaul's and congratulations on the Emmy nomination.
Thank you.
Welcome to Gold Derby's production design panel with Emmy nominees and our roundtable portion. I'm David Buchanan, joined by Gianna Costa from RuPaul's Drag Race, Patrick Howe from Only Murders in the Building, Eric Morrell from Last Week Tonight with John Oliver, Bob Shaw from The Gilded Age, and Glenda Rovello from Frasier. Such a pleasure to have you all here. I wanted to start with a question, which is, when I watch all of your shows and just TV and film in general, I'm always amazed by the attention to detail in production design. So from all of your work this season, is there some detail in your sets that you're pretty sure the audience maybe won't notice or is going to be hard to spot, but that you're particularly proud of and that you love, and that even if it's only you that knows that it's there, that makes you really happy? Let's start with you, Glenda.
Well, I already mentioned it, like the pendants that we had made by Ryan McNeely, that they're Morse code, and one says Frasier and the other one says Kelsey. Like I really love that we were able to have those manufactured, that the artist agreed to do them and to have them done so quickly. It's amazing how much cooperation you can have and get from an artist.
Gianna?
Oh my God, I'm trying to think right now.
We can come back.
Yeah, come back. I'm like, right now I'm going through every set. I'm like,
You else want to jump in, Patrick?
I guess I'm hoping that the audience notices everything, but I know that's not realistic, and especially since they can only have a chance to see what the camera shows them. But I really do try to layer as much as possible between me and my decorator, Rich Murray, and get as much detail in. So I know, like, I mean, maybe touched on Loretta's apartment. It's a lot of information packed into a small area, and Rich is particularly fond of creating as many Easter eggs as possible because our audience seems to enjoy that. And so in that one, there's so many that and there's no reason for they're just background items, so most of them are kind of subtle, so there's no reason for the camera to really sort of hone in on them in close up. But there's just really charming touches that are mostly things that are from Meryl Streep's career that can be represented visually, something similar to it that's a riff on a lot of her movie roles. That's fun. And actually, since there was and also kind of in Paul Rudd's apartment in this penthouse, since he happens to play a celebrity movie star, there was a lot of similar type of style of Easter eggs to do there. So I think people but from my feedback, people caught so much more than I thought they would. So it's a delight.
Bob?
I have sort of a similar feeling to Glenda that people will do things for you and people will make things for you and they'll do it in a hurry. And someone watches the show and they say, yeah, they have drapes. And they don't know that you had to beg Scalamandre to make them faster than they usually do. Or ask the people who usually have a 6-month turnaround on making this sort of period appropriate carpeting. Could you do it in a few weeks? And people get enthusiastic about working in our industry or working for our industry, and they do amazing things. And the viewer just says, yeah, they're walking on a carpet and they have drapes. And, you know, and we really had to pull many, many strings to get these things to happen.
Eric?
Yeah, I was just trying to think. We used to have a bunch of Easter eggs behind John in his desk because there was a photo back there, and there was a bunch of there was like Game of Thrones castles and all kinds of things. But we redesigned the set a few years ago, and it's now like all geometric, and it's very beautiful, but it's very simple in terms of what it is. But I was trying to think of something. In the train thing, I did model this character who goes under a train after my daughter. So that was kind of a funny thing to put her in such a terrible place. But
how about you, Gianna?
So I don't know how much we see the Untucked Lounge in the normal season, but that is a room chock full of Easter eggs from seasons past of props that we have used, and we collect the props each episode and put them in different areas. So that's like our little Easter egg room. But other than that, it's a lot of the graphics we do for the show, like little graphics that you don't always see. They're like kind of little fun little nods to things, and people don't really see much of them. But but for some odd reason, I like to spend a lot of time on these things that no one else really gets to see. Like it's just color to them. So the amount of time we waste on little nods to the audience that don't see, that's always a thing.
I think what's so great about this group too is there's such a diversity of genres and formats of shows. We've got multicam sitcom, period drama, variety, comedy show, reality show. It's so fun to have you all here. And I wanted to ask if you could kind of work in a totally different genre or format than you're working in now for these series, maybe something you've never done in your career or something that you did earlier in your career and would like to revisit. What would you like to dabble in next if you could make a switch tomorrow, a format that you haven't done before, maybe? Let's start with you, Patrick.
I think it would be, well, in this career, I think I would have to go back to my theater roots, which is really all in college, and other than assisting on Broadway, it was, there's no Broadway shows that I personally designed. So I suppose that would be a wonderful fantasy to return, to do a big Broadway musical. That would be great.
Bob, do you feel similarly about taking a crack at opera?
Well, I do sometimes, but I'm pretty happy within what I'm doing, but I've been doing a lot of period shows. So I have a hunger to do something that's in the future. And, where you had to like make everything up. And it's just such a challenge. And it's like you do something in the future, and somehow or other you have to have the strangest looking glasses you find at Target, because you can't have everything made. But I would love to do what I do, but do it in a future setting.
Yeah, Bob, I'd love to see you do some Star Trekian thing. It would be hilarious.
Gianna?
Oh, I would love to do some kind of like fantasy world, or just like some imaginary reality. I would love to do something where I could just make it all up. Just make it all up in my head. That'd be great.
No research, right?
Yes, that'd be fun.
Make
Yeah.
it up.
Eric?
I think I'd like to do like a Aliens movie, like on the spaceship. Something like that, or maybe some really experimental dance piece. So yeah, either one.
Very eclectic. Glenda, how about you?
There's two. I have a wide range. So I think the first thing would be like historical fiction, total period, just because I do really enjoy the research. And then the other one, which would be my fantasy, would be to design the graphic package for something like the Sphere in Las Vegas. I saw that YouTube and are you too? And it was phenomenal, the graphic package. It was so stunning.
I'd love to hear about your origins too. Is there a memory of either a television show, a film, maybe Patrick, theater, a set that you remember vividly from, a time before this was your career that stands out to you, that maybe inspired you to do this, or that you just remember as particularly like awe-inspiring and amazing from your time as fans of television and film and theater and other genres? Bob?
Well, I mean, as I said before, for me, it was opera, and it led me to theater, but seeing things on the mat, seeing things on that scale, just sets that were so enormous, and it made me decide I wanted to do this for a living when I was 16 years old, because I was, I was the kid who lied to my parents and snuck into the city and went to the opera. And so
Amazing.
that was the holy grail for me.
Eric?
Yeah, I was just thinking that I really enjoyed doing the smaller scale stuff. And when I was a kid, I loved the Wallace and Gromit sets. And like, I really wanted to make miniature sets for like stop motion or something like that. We didn't get to do many interiors, it was all exteriors for this, but I'd love to do that.
Patrick?
I think that an impressionable moment for me, or my version of like in this season where young Loretta, sees her first show in the 60s and sees Diane Carroll performing. My version of that was being kind of starstruck by seeing the high school. I was in grade school, and my sister said, "You want to come see the musical that I'm doing in high school?" And my response was, "What's a musical?" It's like I had never seen anything. And so even just seeing a high school production was eye-opening, and I was kind of awestruck. And then, and then cutting to a much more professional version, something that comes to mind that just really created a classic theater magic moment for me, where it's sort of spine chilling, was Bob Crowley had designed a production of Carousel at Lincoln Center, and there was just a beautifully designed opening segment of how the carousel is actualized and how it transitions from one scene to another. And I found that so magical. It was like, I'd love to do this.
Gianna?
Well, I grew up in the 80s and I watched a lot of music videos. I wasn't supposed to, but I did. I wasn't allowed to watch that channel, but I snuck it every time I could. And so between seeing music videos and the movies of the 80s, which were so off the wall, some of them, between like, you had Never Ending Story, Legend, but then you have like, the real 80s, like Girls Just Want to Have Fun, like all those things. I watched so much TV and movies when I was a kid. I think I just was able to put myself, like transform myself into everything I watched. And I just loved the environment. And I think when I approach things, I always think of like, well, think of like the times like you're in the Madonna video, or you're like Aha, like Take on Me, like those were just such like, when I was a kid, I would just be in those. And so I think seeing so much of that made me want to, I'm a visual person, so I really be able to create sets is kind of, I just never thought I would end up being able to do it. I don't know if that makes sense, but it was just being able to see all that. And then as an adult on shows like Drag Race, where you can kind of pay homage to a lot of those music videos and sets and like pop culture moments of the past. So, yeah.
It's amazing. And Glenda?
I'd have to say that the ones that I was so awestruck by would be like the Star Wars, the futuristic fantasies. And for some reason I'm drawing a total blank of the illustrator from like the 1940s that did like graphite drawings, and they were very futuristic, and they were just really rough sketches of like the tallest buildings that you can imagine. And they always reminded me of like the Star Wars. And then growing up, I too just watched music videos, just turn on that MTV, and I was totally mesmerized, by them. And now when I look back at them, they were pretty rough. They were just, kind of poorly lit by design. And so that created the atmosphere. So, I think that that's also, pretty influential.
Amazing. Well, thank you all so much for your time, Gianna, Patrick, Eric, Bob, and Glenda. Congratulations on these series and your Emmy nominations. And thank you for joining Gold Derby today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
Bye.